My name's Emily Harris. As you could tell by the introduction given, I'm not really in this circle. I don't do really religious study at all. I am a sociologist. Well, I was trained as a sociologist. I now work as a demographer at the Gardner Policy Institute, which is housed within the University of Utah. So I kind of bridge the gap between applied work and academic work. We try to do research that's a little bit more accessible to community partners, legislators, things along those lines. And I'm a demographer now, so I do a lot of research on things that gets half of a slide in most people's presentations. But I think it's really interesting, so I study more population dynamics rather than society at this point. But I'm just going to give you a brief kind of general overview of Utah's demographics and then take a little more detailed look at Salt Lake and Utah counties, which are arguably two very different counties, even though they are within Utah. And most people in here, I think, are very well aware of the differences. But I'm just going to give a brief general overview and kind of pose some questions at the end just to think about for the future. So just a little bit about me. So that's me, my husband, and our two dogs. We just got married in October. We're rock climbers. We're super outdoorsy. We moved here for jobs and for recreation. I was trained as a sociologist. I got a bachelor's and a master's degree in sociology. My major emphasis was in quantitative analysis and also medical sociology. I'm glad there's sociologists in the room. Now I work as a demographer. I do applied demographic research. And yeah, I'm a big quantitative person, so I do a lot of data analysis and try to hopefully interpret and explain complicated data statistics to people that maybe don't necessarily aren't around it very often. And just a quick shout out to where I work. So the Gardner Policy Institute, we're fairly new. We do economic, demographic, and public policy research. And obviously this is their language, but basically we try to kind of branch between the university and the community. And we try to provide university resources and academic style research that is bipartisan and doesn't have influence from any kind of person or party in general. And that's what we believe our strengths are. So just a brief demographic highlight for Utah. So we have a total population of about 3 million people. And I've got U.S. here just so you can kind of compare. So this year we were the third fastest growing state in the nation, behind Nevada and Idaho. We're at 1.9%, which is a lot higher than the U.S., obviously. And there are a lot of signature things about Utah's demographics, and a lot of it is implied because of the LDS Church and the Mormon faith. So we have the youngest median age in the nation. So that median age for the state is 30.8. It's about 8 years lower than the U.S. We have the highest percentage of people under the age of 18, a third of our population. That's pretty high. Persons 65 and older, we are second to last at 10.5%. And then we have the second highest fertility rate in the nation. We just got bumped down this past year to South Dakota. There's a lot of interesting things. A lot of things here are tied to fertility, and we'll talk about that. And then we have the largest household size in the nation. So 3.19 compared to 2.65. So this is a really interesting graphic that I like to show. So this is a population pyramid. I'm sure a lot of people are familiar with it, but just as an explanation, on the x-axis we have the number of people, the total population, and it's bracketed into left and right sides, and that's divided by sex. And then the y-axis is age, and this is single year of age. So what we have are three population pyramids stacked on top of each other, so we can see how Utah's demographics have changed over the past 50 years. You can see in the middle, you have the kind of really fat bottom with a really skinny middle and top. That's in 1960. You can see that we had very high fertility rates then, a lot of people having children. And then fast forward to 2015, that's the middle one. And you can see that we're really starting to fill out currently. Right now you're seeing we still have a fair amount of young population, obviously, but we have more middle-aged people. We're attracting more people from out of the state to come work here. And our population is starting to age, and that's a phenomenon that's been widely discussed in a lot of different disciplines. And one thing that I always think is really interesting right here, I don't know if you can see these little in-cuts. Can anyone guess what those are? Missionaries! Yeah, so we have a very, very distinct missionary cave in this age group. And it is interesting, too, because this is the 2015 pyramid, so the female side is much more pronounced than it was even 5 years ago due to the age change. So that's something we've been dealing with in general. And then the kind of hollow bars around the outside are projected 50 years from now. So that's kind of what we see Utah moving towards in the future. We can see that we have a much more even distribution of young and middle-aged, and obviously a much older population up at the top. Right now, in 2015, we had estimated like 385 centenarians, so people over the age of 100. And in 50 years, we're assuming that there's probably going to be more around 3,000 or 4,000 centenarians. So there are a lot of policy implications for this, but I won't go into that right now. But I want to focus more on Salt Lake and Utah County. So now that we have this general overview of Utah, I want to break it down to these two counties. And like I said, most people here are familiar with the dynamics of Salt Lake and Utah County. The population of these two counties make up a little over half of Utah's population. And so let's just take a quick look. So Salt Lake County has a population of 1.1 million people. It's the economic center of Utah currently. It has a lot of jobs. It's the largest county in Utah population-wise. And right now, Salt Lake is largely saturated. Right now, they're kind of trying to figure out how we can build more places to live. And most of the growth is in the southern and western parts of the county. And if we look at percentage of the population that are LDS members, it's about 45 to 55%. I have hard percentages, but due to a data agreement with the LDS Church, I can only give you ranges. So that's what I'm going to give you in this. So if we look at Utah County, the population is around 600,000. And Utah County has some very interesting and different dynamics. They're a large college county, so we have BYU, we have UVU, which is growing extremely fast. The missionary training centers here. And then there are also some interesting things that are happening outside of the LDS Church. We have Silicon Slopes, and Utah County is a very high-growth county right now. With Salt Lake City filling up, you're seeing a lot of Utah County starting to develop. And so currently, the population is about 75 to 85% of LDS members. And these numbers are any member. This isn't based on, how strongly they adhere to the LDS faith. If they're in the church records, they're in this number. So that's another thing to think about. So I'm just going to compare some of the demographics of these counties that have very different LDS makeup and very different current situations. And I'm not going to say that, anything is causing anything, but a lot of this is associated and what a lot of people generally think of. So on the left we have Salt Lake's census population pyramid. So this isn't an estimate, this is the decennial count. And you can really see that, this doesn't really work. So on Salt Lake you can see that they have a good amount of people in the middle age years. So 30 to 34, 40 to 44, a little bit more of an older population than in Utah County. In Utah County, they have a very large, base, so they have high fertility, a lot of babies being born here, and then there's also a large college population. And you can really see that there is a very young population here. There's not a lot of people in the 70 to 100 year range. And that affects a lot of the demographic statistics that we get. And this is just the median age, and I included the state on a lot of these just so you can kind of see. Typically, Salt Lake County is below the the state basically they typically fall on either side of the state. So here we can see that Utah County's median age, so this is just the past 7 years, it's not going to change very much, but it's around 25 years old. That's a pretty young median age. The state's at 31, and remember the nation is at 38. So that's a very large difference. And then you can see Salt Lake County is above that with 30 to 33. And then this is a very large driver of a lot of the population and demographic dynamics we see between these two counties is the total fertility rate. So this is the average number of children that a hypothetical woman would expect to experience in her reproductive life cycle. And this is just a sum of age-specific fertility rates, so it changes every year. But you can see Utah, for the state, lies in between these two counties. They're at 2.3, Utah County's at 2.72, and Salt Lake's at 2.2. And I don't have it on here, but the national TFR is 1.8. Replacement is 2.1. So there are a lot of differences in the reproductive behavior between these counties, and a lot of this is assumed to be based on the large family sizes in the LDS faith. So just to kind of emphasize the growth patterns between these two counties, so here's Salt Lake County and Utah County for components of population change. So typically growth is made up of two different components. There's net migration, which is the number of people that are coming into the state or into the county, and then natural increase, which is births minus deaths. And typically states will have a positive number. So you can see here, Utah County is, almost half the size of Salt Lake, and in 2015, it had a growth of 18,486, which is 5,000 more than Salt Lake County. That's pretty astounding. And if you look at the makeup, Utah County's natural increase is almost as high as Salt Lake County's. And a large part of this is, Utah County, people have a lot of children, but also because the population is so young, there aren't as many people that are dying. So you have a very different makeup of natural increase. And there are a lot of people moving to Utah County. And a lot of this is interstate. It's not people coming from North Dakota to come to Utah County. It's people moving from Davis, Salt Lake, Weber, and making Utah County their home. And then this is just the household size differences. So persons per household, Utah County has a pretty high one at 3.5 people per household. Salt Lake's at 2.8. And a lot of this has to do with the fact that in Salt Lake County, affordable housing is an issue, so a lot of people are living in apartments rather than living in homes, which tend to have larger families. So now that we have kind of a picture of what it looks like today, what do we think is going to happen in the future, right? Obviously, Utah County is in a very high growth state. And at the Policy Institute, we created 50-year population projections for all of the counties by age and sex. And so we can kind of have, and obviously this is based on assumptions, right? There are assumptions that we have to make to put into our projection model. So, the projection is going to be wrong. It's just a matter of to what extent. But based on current projections, and it's kind of hard to see the numbers, I can tell now, but I can read this number for you. So the total population by county, so this is in 2065. Utah County is at 1.6 million, and Salt Lake is at 1.69. So in 50 years, we think that this is a pretty likely scenario that Utah County will be population-wise the size of Salt Lake County. And what does that mean, right? So if we look at that by a percent population change, then what we can see here is obviously Utah County is growing, but then we have these ring counties, Juab and Wasatch, that are going to grow as well. But this shows 176% growth over 50 years. And that's a lot. And so with these high growth numbers, it's also a very divisive issue. There are kind of different schools of thought on what Utah County is going to look like in 50 years, right? If we bring all these people in, who are the people that are coming into Utah County, and what does that do for the current demographic makeup of Utah County? And so there are two kind of main ideas of what this will mean for Utah County demographic-wise. So scenario one is that Utah County will basically become more like the state in Salt Lake. So currently, Utah in general has a lot of jobs that they just can't supply from people within the state. So right now, Salt Lake County has a lot of people coming in from other states. And with that, you're going to have, just by what happens, you're going to have more people coming in that aren't Mormon, that aren't of the LDS faith. And with those people bring more diversity in behavior and patterns that aren't necessarily aligned with what the LDS Church promotes. So lower fertility, smaller household sizes, and more overall diversity. And then there's the other school of thought that is Utah County is just basically going to become an even bigger Utah County. It's just going to be an even bigger Mormon enclave. What's going to happen is to fill all these jobs, you're going to have people coming in from Davis and Weber and Salt Lake. Basically, all the Mormons are going to converge into Utah County. And and this is, if you look at, like KSL or Salt Lake articles and you read about population growth, it gets people really angry. Like, there's the diversity folks that want more people that are not like them, and then there are the people that want people just like them. That's just naturally how it goes. So, what do we think will happen? Basically, I call this scenario 1.5. So, I think that Utah County is going to probably incorporate segments of both, right? Nothing really happens in absolutes. So, Utah County is still going to continue to attract young adults. It still has BYU. It has UVU. It's going to be a young place still. But it is expanding its employment base, and it's going to have to bring people in that Utah just can't supply, and that those are going to be non-Mormons as well. But it's still going to maintain its Mormon importance. It still has BYU. It has the MTC. It's still going to be, it's just going to change, but it's still going to be the same also. And then also, this is a room full of sociologists, so we all understand this, but obviously economic and social forces will shape behavior regardless of religious preference sometimes. So we just wrote a paper on Utah's changing fertility and how it's been decreasing. It continuously decreases regardless of the LDS population being here, and it's because of things like high housing prices, more education. It just doesn't make as much economic sense to have as many children anymore, regardless of your religious affiliation. So these are all just kind of things to think about, and obviously I don't have answers, but hopefully it gets people thinking about the future and what the counties in the state will look like. So that's all I have.